The heavy oak door clicked shut, the sound echoing the final brutal closing of a chapter in Christina Beaumont's life. Outside, the cold November rain began to fall, plastering strands of her hair to her tear-streaked face. One hand rested on the slight curve of her belly, a secret promise she now had to protect alone. She had just been cast out from the Devereux dynasty, the family she had married into, with nothing but the designer clothes on her back and a heart shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. They called her a gold digger, a liar, a disgrace. They had no idea they had just thrown away their future. And they certainly never imagined that the next time they saw her, it would be at their own gala, where she would hold all the power. This is the story of how a woman with nothing rose to have everything and claimed the most satisfying revenge imaginable. The Devereux estate wasn't a house. It was a statement, a sprawling Tudor-style mansion set on 50 acres of manicured Connecticut countryside. It was a monument to old money and impenetrable power. For Christina, marrying Edward Devereux had felt like stepping into a fairy tale. He was handsome, charming, the heir to the Devereux global shipping fortune. She was an art history graduate with a sharp mind, a kind heart, and a background that was, in the eyes of his family, unforgivably ordinary. Their first year of marriage was a whirlwind of galas, European holidays, and lavish dinners. Christina tried to fit in. She learned which fork to use, how to engage in polite but meaningless conversation about yachting seasons and stock portfolios. She smiled gracefully when Edward's mother, Genevieve Devereux, would make thinly veiled comments about her humble origins. "It's remarkable, Christina, how you've adapted," Genevieve once said over tea, her voice as crisp and cold as the porcelain cup she held. "Some flowers, you see, simply aren't meant for a greenhouse. They wither under the pressure." Christina knew it wasn't a compliment. It was a warning. Edward, for his part, seemed oblivious. He loved Christina, or at least he loved the idea of her. She was his beautiful, intelligent wife, a welcome reprieve from the stuffy, arranged matches his mother had proposed. "Don't mind Mother," he'd say, kissing her temple. "She's from a different era. She'll come around." But she never did. Genevieve saw Christina not as a daughter-in-law, but as an impurity in the pristine Devereux bloodline. She was an outsider who didn't understand the sacrifices and strategies required to maintain their level of wealth and influence. Every move Christina made was scrutinized. Every opinion she voiced was dismissed. The pressure began to erode the foundations of her marriage. Edward, so confident in public, was weak-willed under his mother's influence. He began to parrot Genevieve's criticisms, disguised as loving advice. "Perhaps you shouldn't have worn that dress, darling. It's a bit bold for the fundraising committee," he'd murmur after an event. Or, "Mother was just saying that your views on the museum's new acquisition were a little unsophisticated. It's best to leave that talk to the experts." Christina felt herself shrinking. The vibrant, confident woman she had been was being slowly sanded down into a pale, accommodating reflection of what a Devereux wife was supposed to be. The gilded cage was beautiful, but it was a cage nonetheless, and its bars were closing in. Then everything changed. A wave of morning sickness, a doctor's appointment filled with nervous hope, and finally a confirmation. She was pregnant. Christina was ecstatic. This, she thought, would be the bridge. A child, a Devereux heir, would surely melt Genevieve's icy heart and solidify her place in the family. It would give her and Edward a shared purpose, a bond that his mother couldn't break. She planned a special dinner to tell Edward. She wore the dress he loved, cooked his favorite meal herself, a small act of rebellion against the household staff, and waited for him with a fluttering heart. When she showed him the positive pregnancy test, his face broke into a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He lifted her into the air, laughing. "A son," he proclaimed. "A new heir for Devereux Shipping." "Or a daughter," Christina laughed back, her happiness bubbling over. "A strong, brilliant girl." "Yes, of course," he said, his enthusiasm slightly dimmed. "Whatever it is, it's wonderful." They decided to tell Genevieve the next day at the family's formal Sunday brunch. The dining room was silent, except for the clinking of silver on china. Genevieve sat at the head of the long mahogany table, a queen surveying her court. Edward cleared his throat, his hand finding Christina's under the table. "Mother, we have some rather wonderful news. Christina is pregnant." A heavy silence descended. Genevieve placed her fork down with meticulous precision. She didn't look at Christina. Her gaze, cold and calculating, was fixed on her son. "Are you certain?" she asked, her voice flat. "Of course we're certain," Edward said, his bravado wavering. "We've been to the doctor." Genevieve finally turned her eyes to Christina. There was no joy, no warmth, only a chillingly thorough assessment. It was as if she were examining a piece of livestock. "I see," she said slowly. She dabbed her lips with a linen napkin. "Well, we will have to make the necessary arrangements." And with that, she turned the conversation to the upcoming polo match, leaving Christina's heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. There would be no celebration. There would be no acceptance. This wasn't a grandchild to her. It was a complication, an arrangement to be managed. The fairy tale was over, and the nightmare was just about to begin. Christina squeezed Edward's hand, seeking reassurance, but his grip was limp. He was already retreating, leaving her to face the coming storm alone. The weeks following the announcement were a masterclass in psychological warfare orchestrated by Genevieve Devereux. The matriarch's disapproval manifested not in loud arguments, but in 1,000 subtle cruelties. She would forget to include Christina in family plans, make casual remarks about the importance of strong bloodlines in front of guests, and hire a new household manager. A severe woman named Ms. Finch, who reported Christina's every move directly back to her. Christina tried to talk to Edward, to make him see what was happening. "Your mother is trying to push me out, Edward. Can't you feel it? You're being hormonal, darling," he'd say, distracted, scrolling through stock reports on his tablet. "Mother is just protective of the family. This is a big change for everyone." But Christina knew it was more than that. She started to notice Genevieve in hushed, intense conversations with the family's lawyer, Robert Pike. She saw Ms. Finch observing her with an unnerving focus. A sense of dread began to coil in her stomach, a constant companion to the morning sickness. The trap was sprung on a Tuesday afternoon. Christina was returning from a prenatal appointment, feeling a rare moment of peace as she thought of the tiny heartbeat she had just heard. As she walked into the grand foyer of the estate, she was met not by a welcoming butler, but by Edward Genevieve and Robert Pike, the lawyer. Their faces were grim, set like stone. "Christina," Genevieve began, her voice devoid of any emotion, "there is a matter we must discuss." On the marble-topped table in the center of the room was a file. Genevieve opened it with a theatrical flourish. Inside were photographs. Blurry, long-lens shots of Christina having lunch on a cafe patio with a man. "Who is this Christina?" Edward demanded, his voice tight with an anger that felt rehearsed. Christina squinted at the photos, her mind racing. That's Leo. Leo Vance. He was a classmate in my art history program. I ran into him last week and we had coffee. I told you about it. You told me you were meeting an old friend. Edward spat, jabbing a finger at a picture. This doesn't look like just friends. The photo was cleverly angled, making the friendly hug they'd shared upon parting look like a passionate embrace. Edward, that's ridiculous. It's a misleading photo, she pleaded, looking from his furious face to Genevieve's smug one. I have nothing to hide. You can call him— Oh, we did, Genevieve said smoothly. Or, rather, our investigator did. It seems Mr. Vance has quite the reputation. He also received a rather large sum of money transferred to his account from an offshore holding company 2 days ago. Christina's blood ran cold. What are you implying? It's a very clear picture, Christina, Robert Pike, the lawyer, interjected in a dry tone. You have been seeing this man, and you have been paying him. The implication is that you were paying for his silence. Paying him with what? Christina cried, her voice rising with hysteria. I don't have that kind of money. The only money I have is the allowance you give me. Which brings us to this, Genevieve said, producing another set of documents. Bank statements. They showed a series of significant withdrawals from a secondary household account that Christina managed for expenses like groceries and personal shopping. Withdrawals she had never made. This is insane. Someone forged my signature. I never took this money. She looked desperately at her husband. Edward, you have to believe me. This is a setup. Your mother is doing this. Edward flinched as if struck. He couldn't meet her eyes. Mother would never. Why would she? Because she's hated me from the day I met you. Christina sobbed, tears blurring her vision. Because in her eyes, I am not good enough for you, for this family. And now that I'm carrying your child, she can't risk it. She has to get rid of me. The mention of the baby was a fatal mistake. Genevieve saw her opening and seized it. Her voice dropped, becoming laced with a venomous, feigned sympathy. Oh, my dear girl, after seeing these photos, after learning of your affair, we have to ask ourselves an unfortunate but necessary question. She paused for maximum impact. Are we even sure that child is Edward's? The accusation hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. It was so vile, so monstrous that Christina couldn't even speak. She looked at Edward, her entire world narrowing to his face, silently begging him to defend her, to defend their child. He hesitated. For a split second, a flicker of the man she loved crossed his features. Doubt, confusion, maybe even guilt. But then he looked at his mother, at her imperious, unwavering stare, and the weakness won. His face hardened. I can't believe I was so blind, he said, his voice cracking, to bring this disgrace into my home. No, Edward, no. The Devereux name will not be tarnished by this scandal, Genevieve announced, her voice ringing with finality. We have prepared a document, Christina, a non-disclosure agreement. You will sign it, relinquish any and all claim to the Devereux name and assets, and you will leave this house immediately. In return, we will not press charges for embezzlement. And the baby? Christina whispered, her hand protectively covering her stomach. Genevieve's smile was a razor blade. The baby is your problem. It is not and never will be a Devereux. It was a perfect diabolical checkmate. They had stripped her of her husband, her home, her reputation, and now her child's heritage. Numb with shock and grief, she stared at the pen Robert Pike offered her. Signing it, felt like signing away her life. But the alternative, a public accusation, a potential jail sentence for a crime she didn't commit, all while pregnant, was unthinkable. Her hand shaking, she scrawled her name on the document. "Good," Genevieve said, snatching the papers away. "Ms. Finch has packed a small bag for you. Your other belongings will be disposed of. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises." No one moved to help her. No one said another word. Edward stood like a statue, his jaw clenched, refusing to look at her. The man who had promised to love and protect her was letting his mother throw her and his unborn child out into the street. She walked out of the room, past the priceless art she had once admired up the grand staircase she had floated down on her wedding day. In her room, a single suitcase sat by the door. She picked it up, her mind a whirlwind of pain and disbelief. As she walked back down and towards the front door, she passed Edward one last time. She stopped, her voice a raw whisper. "I will never forgive you for this, Edward. Not for believing her, but for being too much of a coward to even question." He said nothing. Christina pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped out into the cold November rain. The click of the lock behind her was the sound of her world ending. She stood on the edge of the long, winding driveway, pregnant, penniless, and utterly alone, with a storm brewing both in the sky above and the soul within her. The first few weeks were a blur of shame and survival. Christina's phone had been disconnected, her credit cards cancelled. The few friends she had made during her marriage were Edward's friends, society acquaintances who would close ranks around the Devereaux without a second thought. She was a non-person. She sold the last vestiges of her old life, a pair of diamond earrings she'd managed to slip into her pocket, a designer handbag for a pittance at a pawn shop. That money secured her a room in a dingy weekly-rate motel on the industrial outskirts of the city. The room smelled of stale smoke and despair. Every night she would lie on the lumpy mattress, one hand on her growing belly, and cry until exhaustion claimed her. The city that had once been her glamorous playground was now a hostile, unforgiving landscape. She was just another face in the crowd, invisible and struggling. She looked for work, but being visibly pregnant with no recent references and no fixed address made it impossible. Doors were politely but firmly shut in her face. Her savings dwindled with terrifying speed. She went from the motel to a women's shelter. It was clean and safe, but the communal living, the scheduled meals, and the chorus of heartbreaking stories from the other residents served as a constant, brutal reminder of how far she had fallen. She was no longer Christina Devereaux, patron of the arts. She was Christina Beaumont, occupant of cot number 12, a charity case. Yet in that crucible of hardship, something began to change within her. The grief, while still present, began to harden into something else, resolve. The tears she shed were no longer just for her lost life, but for the child growing inside her. This child, her child, deserved more than a life of poverty and struggle. They deserved a mother who was a fighter. The fire that Genevieve and Edward had tried to extinguish was rekindled, fueled now by a mother's protective instinct. She stopped thinking about what she had lost and started focusing on what she could build. Her break came from the most unexpected of places. To pass the long, empty hours at the shelter, she started visiting the public library. She lost herself in books on finance, business management, and non-profit organization. The world she had only ever observed from the sidelines. One afternoon, while reading the financial news, she saw a familiar name in a small article Walter Price, the CEO of Price Holdings, a boutique investment firm. Christina remembered Walter from a charity auction 2 years prior. He was an older man, sharp and unpretentious, who had bid against Edward for a rare painting. While Edward had been loud and boastful, Walter had been quiet and shrewd. He'd spoken to Christina afterwards, not about her husband, but about the art itself, impressed by her knowledge. He had given her his card and said, "If you ever decide to do something more than just attend these things, give me a call. You have a good eye." It was a long shot, a desperate, humiliating gamble. What would a man like that want with a destitute, pregnant woman? But it was the only shot she had. She spent her last few dollars at a thrift store on a simple but professional-looking blouse and skirt. She practiced what she would say 100 times, her voice shaking in the shelter's cramped bathroom mirror. The next day, she took a bus to the gleaming skyscraper that housed Price Holdings. The receptionist looked at the pregnant woman in the ill-fitting clothes with undisguised skepticism. "Do you have an appointment with Mr. Price?" "No," Christina said, her heart pounding. "But if you could just tell him Christina Beaumont is here to see him. He might remember me." She expected to be sent away. She waited for 10 minutes, the silence of the luxurious lobby pressing in on her each tick of the clock, amplifying her certainty of failure. Then the receptionist's phone buzzed. Her eyes widened slightly as she looked at Christina. "Mr. Price will see you now." Walter Price's office was a corner suite with a panoramic view of the city. He stood as she entered, his expression, not of pity, but of keen curiosity. "Mrs. Devereux," he said, his voice calm, "although I see from the society pages that you are no longer using that name. Please sit." Shame washed over her, hot and swift. He knew. Of course he knew. She sat, her hands clenched in her lap. "Mr. Price, Before you begin," he interrupted gently, "let me be direct. I am aware of the rumors the Devereux have been circulating. I also happen to know Genevieve is a venomous old snake, and her son doesn't have a spine to share between a dozen of him. I never believed a word of it." Christina stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. It was the first time in months that someone had looked at her without judgment. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I'm a good judge of character," he said simply. "And I remember our conversation. You weren't just a pretty accessory. You had a spark. So the real question is, why are you here?" The dam of her composure broke. The story poured out of her, the pregnancy, the frame-up, the exile, the shelter. She didn't hold back, her voice thick with the raw pain of it all. She ended not with a plea for a handout, but with a proposition. "I need a job, Mr. Price. Any job. I will file papers, I will answer phones, I will make coffee. I am a hard worker. I am smart. And I will be the most dedicated employee you have ever had. I am not asking for charity. I am asking for a chance to build a life for my child." Walter listened intently, his gaze never wavering. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, steepling his fingers. "You're right," he finally said. "I won't give you charity. I'll give you something better. An opportunity." He gestured to a stack of files on his desk. "My firm manages the endowment for the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. It's a massive fund, but it's been underperforming. The board is old-fashioned, stuck in their ways. They need a new perspective. They need someone who actually understands the art they're funding, but who also has the hunger to understand the market." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. I'll give you a position, a junior analyst in the philanthropic division. The pay will be modest. The hours will be long. You'll be starting at the very bottom. But the path up will be there if you have the talent and the tenacity I think you do." Christina was speechless. It was more than she could have ever dreamed of. "There is one condition," he added. "You will never mention the Devereaux again. Not as a source of anger, not as a source of motivation. Your past is your own, but in this office, your focus is the future. Your work will be your revenge. Success is the only language people like them understand. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," Christina said, her voice filled with a strength she hadn't felt in months. That day, Christina Beaumont walked out of the Price Holdings skyscraper, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The long winter of her despair was finally beginning to thaw. She had a job. She had an ally. And for the first time since that rainy November day, she had hope. The next 5 years were a testament to Christina's resilience. She moved out of the shelter and into a small, clean apartment in a modest neighborhood. 6 weeks after starting her job at Price Holdings, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl with her bright blue eyes and a determined spirit. She named her Lily. Life became a grueling but rewarding routine. Her days were a whirlwind of financial reports, market analyses, and board meetings. Her nights were filled with lullabies, diaper changes, and the quiet joy of watching her daughter sleep. She was often exhausted running on coffee and sheer willpower, but she had never felt more alive. At Price Holdings, she wasn't just an employee. She was a prodigy. Walter Price had been right about her. She had a unique talent for blending her passion for the arts with a sharp, intuitive understanding of finance. She could look at an emerging artist and not only see their creative potential, but also forecast their market value. She could analyze a museum's grant proposal and identify inefficiencies and opportunities that seasoned executives had missed. She started at the bottom fetching coffee and making copies, but her insightful memos and meticulously researched reports quickly got her noticed. She wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, to question the old guard way of doing things at the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. Her ideas were initially met with resistance from the stuffy, entrenched board members, but Walter always had her back, and her results were undeniable. Under her guidance, the Foundation's endowment began to grow at an unprecedented rate. She championed investments in bold contemporary artists, diversified the portfolio, and created community outreach programs that brought art to underserved neighborhoods. She was transforming the Foundation from a staid, passive institution into a dynamic force in the cultural world. Her rise was meteoric, from junior analyst to portfolio manager, from manager to director of philanthropic strategy. With each promotion came more responsibility, more respect, and a better life for her and Lily. She moved into a larger apartment, then a comfortable brownstone. She enrolled Lily in the best schools. They traveled not to the glitzy resorts of her past life, but to the great museums of Florence, Paris, and Amsterdam, where Christina would share her love of art with her daughter. Through it all, she never spoke of the Devereaux. She followed Walter's advice and poured all of her energy into her work and her daughter. She built a new circle of friends, colleagues who admired her intellect, other single mothers from Lily's school who respected her dedication. Her past was a locked room, the key thrown away. But that didn't mean she forgot. In quiet moments, the memory of that cold, rainy day would return. The echo of the lock clicking shut, the chilling indifference in Edward's eyes, the cruel triumph on Genevieve's face. The pain had faded into a scar, but the scar served as a reminder. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not in the petty sense. It was about proving them wrong. It was about building a life so full and successful that their world, their judgment, their very existence became irrelevant. After 5 years of relentless work, Walter Price, now in his late 70s, decided to retire. He called Christina into his office, the same office where she had arrived, desperate and pregnant, all those years ago. The board of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation held their annual vote yesterday. He said, a proud smile on his face. It was unanimous. They have offered you the position of chairwoman of the board. Christina sank into the chair opposite him, stunned. Chairwoman. It was the most prestigious, powerful position in the city's philanthropic arts community. The chairwoman set the entire agenda, controlled the budget, and was the public face of the foundation. Walter, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said, his eyes twinkling. You've earned this, Christina. You rebuilt this foundation from the inside out. You are the only person for the job. Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound, overwhelming gratitude. She thought of the woman in the thrift store blouse, begging for a chance, and she thought of the woman she was now. Yes, she said, her voice firm. Of course I'll say yes. A week later, a large cream-colored envelope arrived at her office. The calligraphy was elegant, the card stock thick and expensive. Her assistant, a bright young woman named Sarah, placed it on her desk. This just came by messenger, Ms. Beaumont. It looks important. Christina picked it up. The embossed crest at the top was instantly recognizable. It was the symbol of the Devereux family. Her heart gave a sudden hard jolt. She slit it open with a letter opener, her hand perfectly steady. Inside was an invitation. Genevieve and Edward Devereux request the pleasure of your company at the 50th Annual Devereux Charity Gala, benefiting the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. At the bottom, a note was scrawled in Genevieve's spiky handwriting. As you are the new chairwoman, your attendance is of course expected. We look forward to welcoming you. Christina stared at the invitation. The Devereux Charity Gala. The glittering jewel in their social crown, the one event they used to cement their status as philanthropic titans, and it benefited her foundation. For years, the Devereux family had been the largest single donor, a fact that gave them immense influence over the board. But now she was the board. A slow smile spread across Christina's face. It wasn't a smile of malice or glee. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated power. They had no idea. In their arrogance, they had likely not even bothered to learn the full name of the new chairwoman they were inviting. They just knew a new person was in charge. They were expecting a stranger. They were about to get a ghost. The lock had clicked shut on her 5 years ago. Now she held the key to the entire building, and she was about to walk right back in through the front door. While Christina was meticulously building her empire, the House of Devereux was slowly rotting from within. The pristine facade they presented to the world concealed a spreading decay, a direct result of Genevieve's iron-fisted control and Edward's passive complicity. After casting Christina out, Edward had done exactly as his mother wished. A year later, he married Penelope van der Sloot, a woman from an equally wealthy and appropriate family. Penelope was beautiful, placid, and utterly uninterested in challenging the status quo. She was the perfect decorative Devereux wife. But the marriage was a hollow affair, a business merger disguised as a union. There was no passion, no real connection. And after 2 years, there was still no heir, a fact that was a constant source of tension and disappointment for Genevieve. Devereux, shipping the cornerstone of the family's fortune, was also struggling. The industry was changing rapidly, with new technologies and more aggressive global competitors. Genevieve, rooted in tradition, refused to adapt. She saw innovation as a risk, not an opportunity. She vetoed Edward's occasional half-hearted suggestions to modernize the fleet or invest in logistics software, preferring the tried-and-true methods that had worked for her husband. As a result, profits were shrinking, and their market share was being steadily eaten away by more forward-thinking rivals. The only person within the family who saw the cracks forming was Brendan Devereux, Edward's younger cousin. Brendan was the artistic one, a quiet, observant man who worked in the family's small acquisitions department, a role that kept him on the periphery. He had always liked Christina, admiring her intelligence and warmth, and had been horrified by how she was treated. He never believed the stories about her infidelity and embezzlement. They had all the hallmarks of his Aunt Genevieve's manipulative schemes. Brendan watched the family's slow decline with a growing sense of alarm. He saw Edward, once his vibrant, charming cousin, become a ghost in his own home. Edward drank more than he used to. His laughter was forced, and his eyes held a permanent weariness. He was a man trapped by his own cowardice, haunted by a choice he could never undo. One evening, Brendan found Edward alone in the vast library of the estate, swirling a glass of scotch. "Big night Saturday?" Brendan said, attempting a light tone. "The 50th anniversary of the Gala. Mother is in a frenzy of planning." Edward grunted, not looking up from his glass. "It's always a frenzy, all for show." "It's an important night for the foundation," Brendan pressed gently. "Especially with the new chairwoman. We need to make a good impression. I hear she's a real powerhouse, completely revitalized their endowment." Edward finally looked up, his eyes unfocused. "Another corporate shark in a dress, I'm sure. Mother will charm her. We'll write a big check, and the Devereux name will remain on the new wing of the museum. That's all that matters." There was a deep cynicism in his voice that hadn't been there 5 years ago. "Is that really all that matters?" Brendan asked quietly. Edward's jaw tightened. "What else is there?" Brendan hesitated, then decided to take the risk. "Do you ever think about her? Edward, about Christina?" The reaction was immediate and violent. Edward slammed his glass down on the table, scotch sloshing over the side onto the polished wood. "Don't say her name in this house." "Why not?" "It's been 5 years. Don't you ever wonder if you made a mistake?" "A mistake?" Edward laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "She betrayed me. She betrayed this family." "Did she?" Brendan challenged, his voice steady. "Or did you just believe the story you were told? Because it was easier than standing up to your mother. I was there, Edward. I saw the evidence. It was too neat, too perfect. It was a performance, and you played your part." Edward's face went pale. He stood up, his fists clenched. "You know nothing. I know that this family is stagnating." Brendan shot back, his own frustration boiling over. "The company is falling behind. Your marriage is a sham, and you look like you haven't had a real night's sleep in 5 years, all because you were too scared to fight for the one person who might have actually made you happy. Was it worth it?" The question hung between them unanswered. Edward stared at his cousin, a storm of anger, guilt, and regret warring in his eyes. Without another word, he turned and stalked out of the room, leaving Brendan alone in the suffocating silence of the library. Brendan knew the truth. The Devereux family wasn't a pillar of strength. It was a house of cards. Their reputation, their influence, their very fortune was built on a fragile foundation of public perception. The annual gala was their most important piece of propaganda, the night they showcased their power and philanthropy to the world. And this year, the guest of honor, the new chairwoman, who held the fate of their social standing in her hands, was the woman they had destroyed. The irony was almost poetic. Brendan had no idea who this new chairwoman was, but he found himself hoping she was everything Edward had described a corporate shark. He hoped she would see the cracks in the Devereux facade, because he knew that with just the right amount of pressure, the entire structure would come crashing down. The day of the gala arrived a crisp, clear autumn Saturday. For Christina, the morning was a study in serene focus. While Genevieve Devereux was terrorizing florists and caterers across town, Christina was in a sunlit park with Lily pushing her on a swing. "Higher, mummy, higher!" Lily squealed her laughter like wind chimes. Christina smiled a genuine, uncomplicated expression of joy. This was her reality. This was the life she had built. The little girl with the bright, curious eyes was her anchor, her purpose. The Devereux, the gala, the coming confrontation. It all felt like a scene from a movie, detached from the beautiful, tangible truth of this moment. "Are you excited for your fancy party tonight?" Lily asked as they walked home holding her mother's hand. "It's a work party, sweetie," Christina said, ruffling her hair. "But yes, I suppose I am a little excited." Excited wasn't the right word. She felt a strange electric calm, the kind a chess master feels when they see the entire board and know with absolute certainty that checkmate is only a few moves away. That afternoon, she prepared her strategy. For years, she had quietly gathered information. Brendan Devereux, racked with guilt, had become an anonymous source. A few months after Christina had started at Price Holdings, he had found a way to contact her through a discreet third-party lawyer. He'd fed her snippets of information, whispers of the shipping company's financial troubles, details of Genevieve's increasingly desperate measures to maintain their image the shell company used to pay off Leo Vance the forgeries on the bank statements. Christina had it all compiled in a slim, secure digital file, a bomb waiting to be detonated. Her plan wasn't to scream or cause a scene. That was Genevieve's style. Hers would be quiet, precise, and utterly devastating. She would let them welcome her fate, and unknowingly hand her the microphone and the stage from which she would dismantle their world. As evening fell, her apartment transformed into a headquarters for her grand return. A professional hairstylist and makeup artist hired for the occasion worked their magic, but Christina was no longer the ingenue trying to fit in. She directed them with a clear vision. The look was not to be soft or romantic. It was to be powerful. Sleek, sophisticated, and untouchable. Her dress was the final piece of armor. She had purchased it herself from a young avant-garde designer she had discovered through one of the foundation's grants. It was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that clung to her figure. It was elegant and severe with a sharp architectural neckline. It was the dress of a woman who was not attending a party, but closing a deal. When she was finally ready, she stood before the full-length mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger to the frightened girl who had cried in the rain 5 years ago. Her eyes, expertly lined, held no trace of fear, only a steely, resolute intelligence. Her hair was swept back in a chic, severe chignon. Around her neck was a single piece of jewelry, a necklace of interlocking platinum circles, a gift from Walter Price, symbolizing strength and continuity. Her babysitter arrived, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable. Lily ran to give her mother a hug, careful not to wrinkle the silk. "Wow, Mummy," she breathed, looking up in awe. "You look like a queen." Christina knelt down, her expression softening. "Thank you, my love." She kissed Lily's forehead. "You are the reason for all of this. Never forget that." As the sleek black car she had summoned pulled up to her brownstone, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an encrypted number. "Brendan. He knows. Someone on the Foundation's junior board mentioned your full name to him an hour ago. He and Genevieve are waiting. Be careful." Christina's heart didn't race. Her calm didn't waver. A small, grim smile touched her lips. So the element of complete surprise was gone. It didn't matter. In fact, it might even be better this way. Let them sweat. Let them wait in dread for the ghost they thought they had banished forever. "To the Devereux estate," she told the driver, her voice even and cool. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving her warm, happy home behind, and plunging into the cool darkness of the night. She was heading back into the gilded cage, but this time she wasn't the captive. She was the hunter. The long, winding driveway of the Devereux estate was just as she remembered it, lined with ancient oak trees and flickering gaslights. But tonight it didn't inspire awe. It looked like a path to a mausoleum. When the car door was opened by a valet, a hush fell over the immediate area. The guests arriving clad in their jewels and tuxedos all turned to look. Christina emerged from the car, not with the tentative uncertainty of her past self, but with the fluid, deliberate size of a woman who owned every room she entered. She ascended the stone steps, the midnight blue of her dress a stark contrast to the warm glow emanating from the open doors. And there, in the grand foyer, where her life had been destroyed, stood Genevieve and Edward Devereux. Brendan's warning was correct. Their faces were masks of controlled shock. Genevieve's polite socialite smile was frozen, brittle as glass. The color had drained from Edward's face, leaving him looking ashen under the brilliant light of the chandelier. He stared at her as if he had seen a spectre, his eyes wide, with a mixture of disbelief, fear, and something else, a flicker of an old, buried longing. Christina paused at the threshold, letting the moment hang in the air. She met their gazes one by one. She looked at Genevieve, her expression unreadable, and then her eyes settled on Edward. She held his gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of their shared history and his ultimate betrayal. Then she smiled. It was a cool, polite, and utterly dismissive smile. "Genevieve, Edward," she said, her voice carrying easily in the suddenly quiet foyer. "How good of you to host this event for my foundation. The decorations are adequate." The subtle barb hit its mark. Genevieve's smile tightened at the edges. "Christina," she managed to say, her voice a strained imitation of cordiality. "What a surprise. We had no idea it was you." "I've been rather busy," Christina replied smoothly, stepping past them into the ballroom as if she owned the place. And in a way she did. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite, a sea of familiar faces that had once looked down on her, or pitied her. Now, they stared with open curiosity and surprise. Whispers erupted like wildfire as she moved through the room, a shark gliding through a school of fish. "Is that Christina Beaumont? I thought she'd disappeared. She's the new chairwoman of the MAF." She ignored them, heading straight for the small elevated stage at the far end of the room, where a podium was set up. It was customary for the host and the foundation chair to give speeches. That was her stage. Edward, shaken from his stupor, followed her. "Christina, wait," he said, his voice low and urgent, catching her arm just before she reached the stage. She stopped and looked down at his hand on her silk sleeve with disdain until he quickly removed it. "What do you want, Edward? We need to talk, not here." "Here is the only place we will ever talk again," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper of pure ice. "You had your chance to talk to me 5 years ago. You chose silence. I didn't know what to do." He stammered, his eyes pleading. "She had everything, the photos, the bank records." "You mean the fabricated photos and the forged bank records?" Christina countered, her voice dangerously quiet. "The ones paid for by a shell corporation traced back to your mother's personal holdings. Did you know she paid Leo Vance $200,000 to play his part and then disappear? Or did you not bother to look past the convenient story she handed you?" Edward recoiled, his face a mess of confusion and dawning horror. How do you know that? I know everything," she said, turning her back on him and stepping up to the stage. Genevieve intercepted her at the podium, her face a mask of fury. "Whatever game you think you're playing, you will lose," she hissed, her voice low enough that only Christina could hear. "This is my home. These are my guests. You will be gracious, you will accept our donation, and you will leave. Or I will destroy you all over again." Christina simply smiled at her. "You're home." "Your guests, look around, Genevieve. This is a fundraiser for the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. That makes them my guests, and this is my stage." With that, she tapped the microphone, the sharp sound silencing the room. Every eye was on her. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice calm, confident, and resonant. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christina Beaumont, and I am the new chairwoman of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. I want to thank you all for your incredible generosity tonight. And of course, a special thank you to our hosts, the Devereaux family." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the crowd before landing once again on Genevieve and Edward, who stood frozen at the foot of the stage. "For 50 years, the Devereaux name has been synonymous with philanthropy in this city," she continued, her tone even. "They have built a legacy on the foundations of integrity and community support. But legacies like the grandest of houses must have strong, honest foundations. Otherwise, they are nothing but hollow facades destined to crumble." A nervous murmur went through the crowd. This was not the standard fawning speech they were used to. "Tonight, I am announcing a new initiative for the foundation, the Truth in Philanthropy Fund. From this day forward, our foundation will only partner with individuals and corporations who meet the highest standards of ethical conduct, both publicly and privately. We will be conducting a full, transparent review of all our major donors, because true charity is not about writing a check to polish a tarnished name. It's about genuine integrity." She looked directly at Genevieve. "It's about not framing an innocent person to protect a bloodline. It's about not disowning your own flesh and blood out of spite and fear." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Genevieve's face was a deathly white. Edward looked like he was about to be sick. 5 years ago, Christina's voice rang out clear and strong. "I was cast out of this very house, pregnant and penniless, accused of crimes I did not commit. The people who did that to me are standing before you tonight, asking for your applause." She let that sink in. The silence was absolute suffocating. "But this isn't a story of victimhood," Christina declared, her voice rising with power. "This is a story of resilience. I built a new life. I built a career. And I have raised a wonderful, brilliant 5-year-old daughter on my own. The Devereaux thought they were throwing me to the wolves. They didn't realize I would return leading the pack. She raised her glass. So I ask you to join me in a toast, not to the Devereaux, but to the truth, to second chances, and to the enduring power of a woman who was told she was worthless, but who proved she was priceless. To the future of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation, a future of transparency and honor. She drank from her glass. For a moment, nobody moved. Then in the back, an older woman began to clap. Then another person. And another. Soon the entire ballroom, save for a few of Genevieve's closest cronies, erupted in thunderous applause. They weren't just clapping for her speech. They were clapping for her story, for her unbelievable strength. Amid the ovation, Christina stepped down from the stage. She walked past Genevieve, whose face was a mask of utter impotent rage, and past Edward, who was staring at her with a look of such profound regret, it was almost pitiable. She didn't spare them another glance. Her work was done. She hadn't needed to show them the evidence she'd collected. The truth spoken from a position of unassailable power was bomb enough. The Devereaux legacy wasn't just cracked, it was shattered. The whispers would become headlines by morning. Their social standing was annihilated. Their business, already fragile, would likely not survive the scandal. Christina Beaumont walked out of the Devereaux mansion and into the cool, clean night air, leaving the ruins of her past behind her for the final time. She hadn't just gotten revenge. She had achieved justice. And it was so much sweeter. Christina's speech at the gala was more than just a moment of personal victory. It was a seismic event that reshaped the city's social and philanthropic landscape. The Devereaux empire crumbled with astonishing speed. Their stocks plummeted long-time business partners, severed ties, and they became social pariahs overnight. Genevieve retreated into the silent seclusion of her now tarnished estate, a queen without a court. Edward, stripped of his name, his wife, and his fortune, disappeared from public life, a broken man finally paying the price for his cowardice. The gala was their end. But for Christina, it was just the beginning. She led the Metropolitan Arts Foundation into a new era of integrity and influence, becoming one of the most respected figures in the country. Her true wealth, however, was never measured in dollars or accolades, but in the quiet, happy moments with her daughter Lily. She had shown her daughter and the world that your beginning does not have to dictate your end. She proved that the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest souls, and that the best revenge isn't loud and destructive, but is the quiet, undeniable triumph of a life well lived. If her story of triumph moved you, and if you believe in the power of resilience to overcome any obstacle, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see that the end is sometimes a new beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you won't miss our next story of justice and empowerment. What part of Christina's journey resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for listening.